Oh, and welcome everybody to Fishy Work episode 6. In this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to start a little bit different too. So let's start by asking Alin a bunch of yes/no questions. Alin.
Yes.
Can we think about the sustainability of seafood without thinking about the people who catch them?
Absolutely not.
You were very loud.
Oh, it's too loud.
No,
Okay.
it's fine. You can be that loud.
Okay.
I just need to prepare for that.
Okay.
Let's try it again. Hey, Alin, can we talk about the sustainability of seafood without thinking about the people who catch them?
Absolutely.
Do we know if the seafood we eat is free from forced labor?
Do you know? No.
Do fish workers have no agency? Are they just victims of global capitalism?
No, they do have it.
They do have agency.
Yes.
So, no, yes, that was a bad question.
Yeah.
4, is there anything anyone can do to help improve the lives of fish workers?
Yes.
5, but don't eco-labels on food assure us that everything is absolutely fine?
Nope.
No. Okay, welcome to episode 6 of Fishy Work, season finale, in which we are going to be talking about, well, all of the episodes that we've had so far. So me and Alin are going to pick some of our favourite moments, listen to them together with you, and then reflect a little bit on what we've learned in the last 5 episodes. Alin's going to give us a little bit of a preview about what to expect in season 2. Am I right, Dr. Kadfak?
Yes.
Yes.
Talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Okay, so let's first of all then let's listen to a little bit from episode 1. We're talking with Melissa Marschke and Peter van der Geest about working conditions in industrial fishing.
I think fish work is absolutely dangerous, and that wouldn't be disputed. And that's because fishers, whether you're fishing near home or you're out on the high seas, you're working on a moving platform with sharp equipment, with ropes, with other gear. There's waves, there can be intense storms. So it's a mobile platform. You're constantly moving and hauling in gear with fish, or you're setting nets. And so I think nobody would dispute that it's quite dangerous, and there's an occupational health and safety thing. But what has also been happening in recent years is that working conditions in some fisheries have absolutely declined, especially those further out on the high seas.
We're talking about the big industrial deep sea fisheries, which has really increasingly turned to migrant workers and to low-paid migrant workers, and has been structured into the seafood industry. And so I think what you're finding is pressure everywhere to turn to migrant workers, paid very little money, which produces also racial hierarchies on vessels. It means that the captain might be white or might be Chinese, the workers are from Indonesia and the Philippines, and that increases the likelihood of those workers being treated very badly, basically out of a kind of a racism. So that's really the kind of fisheries we're talking about. The other side of it is that fisheries are excluded from most national labor regulations and codes. This is something that is common for both fisheries and agriculture, but is especially extreme in fisheries because of fisheries, especially the big industrial fisheries that operate out on the high seas. There, a lot of countries say, look, they're fishing outside of our national territory, so therefore we don't have to apply minimum wage or, overtime hours and all that kind of stuff.
So that's how we started off this season, really getting a pretty tough overview of the possibilities for exploitation at sea. And I think what struck me about it, and in my complete ignorance to the topic at the time, was the ways in which regulation just was very difficult to apply or enforce on fishing vessels. I don't know why I thought it would be possible. I guess because I thought, like as with other industries, there might be ways of circumnavigating certain things, but I didn't realize it was so structurally built into big fisheries, the ability for companies and for captains to really just, work people, not just very, very hard, but exploit people in ways that really shocked me, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, before the issue has been the flag of convenience, right? When the vessel has been flying the flag of convenience, meaning that they just pick up which flag they want to fly in international water. And so people actually don't know who were in those fishing vessels who were working there. So it's very complex, but I think we see hopes that people are, trying to address these issues, like international labor organizations and international transport federations are starting to address fish work on the fishing vessels.
Yeah, I mean, I picked an excerpt here that really highlighted the exploitation that was going on, but later on in the interview, of course, both Peter and Melissa also talked about the ways in which actually through sort of sustained work by labor unions and other organizations, it is actually possible also to bring about real change as well.
Yeah.
All right, shall we listen to episode 2?
Yes, which one is that?
I can't remember.
You don't remember.
This episode, we're speaking with Miriam Wilhelm and Andrew Crane about intervening in the supply chain.
And I think for me, and some of the kind of fascinating things that we found in that respect, I mean, the work that I've done before looking at business and NGO partnerships, you often get this kind of idea that it's fine if they're going to be working with companies. But we actually found that the most successful interventions were actually with NGOs that had more of their legitimacy with the migrant worker community than with other companies. And in fact, the NGOs that were supported by and working a lot with other companies kind of were less successful because they didn't have the same kind of embeddedness, the same kind of referent power that the NGOs that had a good reputation with other embedded NGOs and bodies established around this issue were. Similarly, the kind of expert knowledge that they needed. But these were all expert kind of NGOs. And typically you think the ones that have the broader knowledge, the ones that are kind of international NGOs that have a kind of deep knowledge about the broader institutions are often the ones that companies like to partner with. But in this case, it was really ones that had very specific contextual knowledge.
But if I can add to that, so I think this context knowledge, that's very important, right? So we mentioned the legitimacy with the migrant workers, that this is very important. And depending on the migrant worker groups, they're also different. They have different needs. And it requires, of course, obviously different language skills and contextual skills to connect with each migrant worker group. But also the knowledge on the context of fishing was important. So we talked about it earlier that work in fishing is very specific. It differs from work in other settings like manufacturing or construction. So those NGOs that understood this context, they were also more respected by the workers themselves, but also trusted by the companies to really be able to help formulate better standards and also help with effective auditing of working conditions. So I think that's maybe another thing I want to highlight there. And the other aspect is about maybe the problem of scaling up. Like Andy said, it's for companies, it might be easier to work with a global NGO that already speaks your language or speaks the language of business, but you really need to invest time and effort to work with these local NGOs that have these very narrow expertise, and that at the same time can make it also challenging maybe to look for these turnkey solutions, right? Like a lot of companies are doing right now. They're looking for worker voice apps that they can install or give to all their suppliers all around the globe, or they're looking for whistleblowing platforms that are operated by NGOs. And, so these scalable solutions, and particularly those based on technologies, are difficult because, they're often not very good in establishing trust, particularly from vulnerable worker groups.
You start.
Okay, so again, I mean, I know you were involved in the research that they were talking about. So
Yes.
which I think we referenced also in the discussion as well. But yeah, what was super interesting for me and why I selected this excerpt is because it really points at the tension of those moments when businesses try to improve, if they actually genuinely want to improve. And at the one hand is, of course, there are people who are easy to speak to, right? And I think some of that is definitely a class dimension or maybe even a cosmopolitan dimension, right? The people who are working at these large NGOs or these international organizations are able to sit down and have a conversation with people who are high up in businesses because maybe they went to the same sort of schools and maybe they're from the same sort of class background and maybe they have the same levels of education, but these aren't the same types of organizations who can go and speak to fisher folk, to fish workers in a genuine way. And maybe these organizations that are a bit more grassroots, that are a bit more activisty, that have a bit more of a political agenda, they have the legitimacy of, or from fish workers, maybe because they were fish workers themselves at some point, or maybe they still are fish workers, but they don't have maybe the language nor maybe the desire to speak to businesses in a way that businesses want to hear. So I think it was really interesting to hear how this tension has played out and how some organizations have, to varying degrees of success, tried to square this circle to some degree.
Yeah. I think we were there at the time when a lot of international funders are pouring in funding opportunities for local NGOs and the front runner NGO who actually work with the fish worker. So we were able to capture that moment and how the big NGO communicate and work together with the local NGO and how would that kind of like trickle down at the port level and work together with the fish worker. So, and I understand because I used to work in NGO before, and I know how.
I never knew that about you.
Yes, I know how, with what kind of language you're supposed to write in the reports, right? Mm-hmm. It's a different kind of language, a different kind of, in comparison to the academic language, it's different. And how you frame interview, how you do survey, you need quite a lot of skills to be able to communicate that to the public. And of course, not all the local NGO have that skills. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And I think it's also the trend that we also wrote in another paper, which was not in these conversations, but together with Miriam, we wrote about the what happens when Thailand's become kind of a developed countries. So Thailand received less and less funding opportunities. What happened for the local NGO to survive, basically? So we kind of make that argument and say, okay, modern slavery as a framing came at the right times when local NGO need support in terms of funding to continue their work. And and it was, I forgot what I want to say. Yeah, and how such a countries, you have wealth. Thailand's become, middle income countries, but there's a lot of vulnerable groups of people, especially migrant workers.
Yeah.
So,
migrant workers from Burma specifically.
Or
exactly. Myanmar. Yeah. And if I remember well, and maybe it's mentioned in one or two episodes, but it's worth highlighting that in Thailand, migrant workers are not allowed to form trade unions.
No.
Exactly. So some of the stuff we talk about in other episodes when we're talking about how trade unions can play an important role in improving the lives of fish workers, it's very difficult to realize this in the Thai context because so many people who work in the fishing industry are, due to regulations, excluded, or due to the law, excluded from the ability to join a trade union.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's listen to something from episode 3.
Yes.
Do you remember what that one is about?
Migrations agency.
Well done. Ding,
yes. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
In this episode, we want to center on the fish workers, especially migrant workers, including looking into how they migrate and, crucially, what their migration means in social, political, and economic terms. And we have 2 amazing researchers to help us understand this. Siddharth Chakravarti, a PhD researcher at Queen Mary University of London, and Andrew Lee, assistant professor at the Sanford School of Social and Family Dynamics, Arizona State University.
How do we connect what we find in our specific sites with a broader audience? Now, I have a couple of thoughts. The first one being the importance of highlighting migrants' agency and their autonomy in impacting change. So it connects to my firm belief that as social scientists, we cannot study a social phenomenon without making a concerted effort to understand the perspective and experiences of the social actors. So in my research, I focus on the experiences and the perspective of these social actors. And what my study shows is how these small acts of resistance from these migrant fishermen, so men jumping ship, absconding onto the shores of Trinidad and Tobago, how they can have larger structural changes, how they can trigger these large macro changes through their small acts of desertion. For example, because of these high desertion rates, the Taiwanese government has implemented several migrant labor policies to counteract this runaway migrant phenomenon. So a lot of these acts are trying to free up these migrants, giving them autonomy to transfer to different ships, different workplaces, if the ones that they work in are too abusive. And very much that example shows that, these small acts of desertion do have larger societal effects.
You picked up a really important point, Andrew, on agency. Very often what's got lost in the narrative is what workers have themselves done, both actively, but also in these micro ways of, under the surface desertions that you're talking about. And just to connect that to what's happening in India, paying attention to agency has revealed a few things. One is that while there is a lot of migration, the advantage of migrating from a particular region where these workers come from is that with agrarian decline, most of the workers are 14, 15 years old and migrating for the first time. And fishing is 10 months of backbreaking work, but at the same time, it's also 10 months of work, which is scarce and rarely available in a lot of other seasonal work. And the other thing is that people also move on. So when we went back after COVID to do some follow-up research for the paper, we found that most of the workers are no longer in Goa, and they've acquired the skills and they've moved to the southern state of Karnataka, where wages are higher. People work on catch share arrangements where they get a percentage of the fish that has been caught as opposed to wages, where they face a more equal kind of working environment. So I think that point that you make on paying attention to agency and what workers do is really, really important.
So what's interesting listening there is how both Andrew and Siddharth really tried to understand fish work from the point of view of fish workers, right?
Yes.
So I think very often when people are talking about the exploitative conditions in any industry or in any situation, it's very easy to look at it a bit too structurally and a bit too abstract. And they have both said, okay, but why do people do this? Like, why do people do what they do, and what are the consequences of that? And I think that's really important, without wanting to romanticize or suggest that small particular acts can necessarily or always or implicitly have big structural changes. I think what was interesting for me was to approach things from a different angle. So not from the, okay, why are these things bad? But okay, so why do people do the things that they do? And what are the effects of that? Yes.
And I think it's important. I like them both, that they bring, the voice, worker voice, and what they really experience through the ethnography work. And it's important to remind ourselves that we can't victimize the fish worker. We can't just say like they have no agency. They have some certain level of agency, and the thing they do, and they want to go back to fishing, except the extreme case of abuse, then they don't want to go back to the same fishing boat maybe. But, they want to do the thing that they do because they want to earn a living. So to solve that problem is not, go to court and give the compensation and send them back home. That's not the solutions. The solution is to find ways that empower them, or find way that, make working condition livable.
Yeah, but exactly. And I work in very different contexts, but I always am very careful to try to understand that people who are in seemingly very difficult situations are often the ones who have the highest levels of critical thinking and the highest types of critique of any sort of systems. And that is a form of agency in a sense of when they apply those critiques and do certain things. That isn't, and because they also have to live at the same time, that doesn't mean that people stop necessarily doing work, or if they do and they jump ship, they are fully aware that they're going to be going into a very vulnerable situation as well. But the idea that the people who are choosing to do certain things are doing so completely slave-like to structures is highly problematic, because it really doesn't take people seriously as people.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Alrighty, next one. I got so excited I forgot that we're going to go on to episode 4 now. So do you remember what episode 4 was about?
Oh, we're going to Ghana.
We are going to Ghana.
Yeah, exactly.
Union power.
In this episode, we're going to be speaking with Bright Mate Kweku Chai, a former fisher and boatswain on industrial trawl, semi-industrial and artisanal vessels. Bright now acts as a local chairman for NUSPA, the National Union for Sea, Port and Allied Workers in Ghana. And we're also joined by Vanessa Jete, a senior research scientist at the Centre for Development and Environment at the University of Bern in Switzerland.
Yeah, for the fishes, they need that solidarity between them and the fish mummies, because the fish mummies always help them. And without the fish that the fisher will bring to the fish mummy can never help the fisher, because you bring me something and I benefit from, and when you need something, I also help you. So that is how it goes over there. Yeah.
But, I spoke to 2 fish mummies just now, and I have a sense that, yes, they cannot help them anymore. They said, we can't help them. It's hard to see that they are asking us for money. Maybe their wife is pregnant, they need to buy things, and we just can't help them. But it doesn't seem like they're bitter. They understand the reason. It's not the fishers' fault. It was funny also because I said to them, well, the fishers are getting money now, so they could just give you money. And they said, no, they don't do that. And I said, do the fishers save the money? Because they're getting more than they used to. They're supposed to save it for the closed season. And they laughed and said, that men are not good with money the way we as women are. Yeah, so I think there is solidarity still. I asked the women if they're going to go back to port after the closed season to see if things improve. And they said, yes, for sure. We'll go back and see if we can get some fish.
So apart from picking some terrible examples of sexism against men, they're displayed by Vanessa. And what was really interesting about the discussion between Bright and Vanessa, I found, was the ways in which, in this case, they're talking about the formalization of certain things. So this was the formalization of pay. So in the past, the fish workers used to receive fish at the end of their fishing trip. And then after contracts got formalized, instead of receiving the fish, they received more money at the end of each month, or at the end of each trip, rather. And what that did was, it meant that instead of having these fish that then they would take home to their families, which was very, very important after being away at sea, they also didn't have fish to give to what they call here fish mummies, which are the women who buy and sell fish in and around the ports in Ghana. And this created a whole web, ties of solidarity, alternative economies. These fish workers could then sometimes take loans from these fish mummies who knew and trusted them because they were the people who they bought fish from. So I'm revealing myself as a bit of an anthropologist here because I am an anthropologist, but these sorts of things really fascinate me, like how the sort of shifts from informal to formal, the unintended consequences of these and these new social relations which emerge through economic activities. So that's why I picked that excerpt. How did you find it, Alin?
I think you sum it all up, Ian. I don't have any expertise left to say in this episode. That's why you are the, main podcaster.
No, I figured that's what men talk too much. As well as being bad with money, men talk too much, and I spoke too much rather than asking you what you thought.
No, that's good. I mean, of course, I pick up on fish as currency, right? Mm-hmm. And tied all the actors together. But I see from actually a different perspective, actually how close relations fish worker and the unions in connections with the collapse of fish. Ecologicals and labor go hand in hand, actually. It shows that, I mean, especially the case of Ghana, because we know that EU gave a yellow card, a second yellow card, due to the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. So the collapse of fish stocks has been, kind of changed the way the worker and relationships of the fish worker in Ghana, as a classic example. And it's a good example that actually we brought it up in the 4th episode.
Yeah. As you just said, you didn't have anything to say. You actually had quite a lot to say. So there you are.
I have to take my space.
And episode 5, you should remember this one because we just recorded it last month. What was episode 5 about?
The magic wand.
Yeah, the magic wand. The magic wand of eco-labels. All right, let's listen to a little bit of that.
Sure. So my name's Chris Williams. I'm the Fisheries Section Coordinator at the ITF, which is the International Transport Workers Federation.
I'm Katrina Nakamura, and I'm the Director of the Sustainability Incubator, and we're a firm conducting primary research worldwide into labor and human rights in seafood supply chains. I think we have to just clear our eyes of the gauze. I mean, the MSC has been in the center. It kind of seized the sustainability market and uses a tone which implies an authority, which it's really hard for me to understand, because when you drill into the procedures of the organization like I have, the authority isn't based on the evidence they collect. The authority is just based on them saying to everyone, we're the authority. And it used to be, as Chris pointed out, it came from these origins with World Wildlife Fund, like a dialogue with environmental organizations. So it kind of rode a couple decades of legitimacy from having environmental partners. It's genuinely without legitimacy in its practice today, but it's bestowed legitimacy because of years of perception making. It actually is mind-boggling the extent to which the power has accrued within this commercial organization.
Beautifully put. And I mean, what it boils down to is conflict of interest, isn't it? It's like if you're paying someone to audit you, you want a good result, they want your business. It's not truly independent. And there's a lot of these kind of voluntary audit schemes, third-party audit schemes and certifications and labels that pop up to basically fill a void. But unfortunately, it's just marketing, and to keep the market share, because supermarkets and big retailers demand it, the industry has to play along with it, and then they do their self-assessment, and their self-assessment said everything's fine, and the laundromat just keeps spinning. So it's never going to fulfill that function of detecting labor abuse, because that's not actually what it's set out to do. It's just done by implication. So you think this is a sustainable product, I feel good about myself, but really behind that label, when it comes to the social dimension and working conditions, there's actually nothing. If anything, there's just a veil of secrecy that's allowed to continue under the illusion of some kind of transparency.
So I know you loved this episode, Alin, because I was wandering rather around the university where you work today, just by chance. In corridors, you need a special car to get through to. And I wandered past your office, and I saw a massive poster on your door that you made especially to advertise this episode to your colleagues. So what did you really like or take away from this episode?
Yeah. Are you sneaking into my office?
Not into your office, but
I mean, we need more advertising in our podcast.
Yeah, we do need more
Hopefully your
advertising.
listeners
Please.
are trying to please spread the word.
Yeah, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
Exactly. Throw in a bit of advertisement. No, I like it because it informs us certain things, and it's as a consumer generally, and we know, and we heard about it, the critique of eco labels so often. It's not only MSC but other kind of eco labels, and Katrina and Chris gave example and explain exactly how the whole system work, and that's bringing me to thinking a bit more about transparency. Like, why do we need this? Why do we need to know information? I mean, in put aside all this theorizing transparency and all the recent environmental governance concept like governance by disclosure by Ati Gupta and all this governance, informational governance. Why do we need to know? Do you think when we know it, it's more sustainable? We have to ask ourselves, like, as a consumer, why do you want to know where your tofu come from?
Actually,
is it from EU or is it from
my tofu? I'm being vegetarian shamed.
No, but no, because I'm buying the tofu that claim to produce in Malmo. So I do look where it's come from and informations.
Yeah. I don't look.
Look.
The reason why I don't look is because I hate being in supermarkets.
That's my wonderland. I love supermarkets.
I hate supermarkets, and I sometimes go to the local market. But as I've done research for a completely different project into food in Hungary, where I live, I've realised that these markets aren't necessarily selling particularly great produce. They're just buying it from central distribution points, and it's not necessarily done in a way which is great for the land. It's probably done in a way very often which is supporting oligarchs and so on. So you get to a point where it's like, oh God, like, whatever. So, and I used to work on an organic farm for many months, and I care about the land, and I care very much about exploitation of workers. But at the same time, I just know that it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of like bullshit. Like, like the same way that food pretends to be healthy. You're also a mum. So that when you go to the shop and you're buying cereal for your daughter, that when it says we've added vitamins, but like it's got whatever, how many spoonfuls of sugar, and it's ultra processed and all these things. But all of this stuff is marketing, right? Yeah. You can buy food boxes, from directly, from the farmers. And that's great if you can manage to fit that into your extremely busy life where you're going to different places and you have to take it in terms to cook with your partner. So sometimes they're wanting to buy different things and all of those blah, blah, blahs, then that's great. But actually, once you get into a supermarket setting or a big market setting, basically, I think once you've stepped in there, you've already given up.
Okay. Yeah.
A bit of a rundown.
A bit of rundown and unromanticize my supermarket experience then.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Exactly. I'm sorry, but maybe you should enjoy supermarkets. If that is your happy place, then don't let me judge you. But I've got something much more interesting to ask you about than supermarkets, and that is what is coming up in season 2 of Fishy Work. Because yes, there is going to be a season 2.
Yes. And maybe a listener can give us comments and what do they want? What do you want to hear in this?
Definitely. You can find all the contact details at www.justseafood.org.
Yep.
And there you can find all of the contact details and get in touch with, probably with Alin.
In Thailand, so. Okay.
Alin,
Right.
doctor.
There was a
Doctor. What's
banana bread in my teeth.
Okay. But what's coming up in season 2?
We're going to talk about new normal. Then you have to ask, what is new normal?
What is new normal?
Yes. So the new normal is about, the status of the world fisheries. Now do you know that we are in the period that we are eating fish, farm fish instead of wild catch.
So there's more fish being eaten by humans on the planet that were farmed in captivity rather than being caught wild out at sea.
Exactly.
I
since,
did.
Since 2022.
Since 2022. So I
Yep.
did not know that, and I've not known that since 2022.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. And is that what season 2 is going to be about?
Partly, yes. And what is going on around that aquaculture and what feed into the aquaculture, this fish meal, fish oil productions, and what's in the fish meal.
What is in fish meal?
Lots of things.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you tell me? Can you tell me one of them?
The one of the problematic, and I think it's a bit raise alarm, is the trash fish or juvenile fish or forage fish, or whatever we're trying to frame it. Is trash fish is a political terms in a way. I think, in my opinion, because it's trash, therefore it's not so good, but actually it's good. It's valuable.
Okay, so this is the fish that humans don't want to eat, so they feed it to other fish instead.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it's valuable. It is good enough to be eaten by human.
But you forgot to mention one thing, which is in, what's the term? Aquaculture, which is the farmed fish, right? Or the caged fish. And that is labor power, because that also goes into the production of these fish, right?
Yes.
So I'm guessing we're also going to be talking about work and labor.
Always.
Always. Always.
As always.
As
Even more
always.
complex, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a lot to look forward to. Sometime in the new year, in the next year, sometime during next year, episode 2 will land. In the meantime,
season 2 will land.
See?
See? I have to correct my podcaster.
Yeah. It's been a long day.
Yes.
It's been a long day. I've been worked hard, and I'm not in a union. And season 2 will arrive sometime next year, and it will cover all of those topics. And in the meantime, if you want to let other people know about season 1, we would be very, very happy. So please do that. Share it with your friends and colleagues. Rate us, review us, and promote us, because we are not the best promoters of our own work ourselves. Is that not right, Dr. Alin?
Exactly. And write to us and let us know, what do you want to hear next?
Exactly. Okay, so that's it for now, Alin. I'm going to miss our monthly check-ins. So what am I going to do every month when I miss you? I guess I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to listen back to the podcast we made together.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Bye.
Bye.
Fishy Work is part of the Just Seafood project, a collaboration between the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences in Sweden, the University of Ottawa in Canada, the Institute of Social Sciences of the Central Region, Vietnam, and the Cambodia Development Resource Institute in Cambodia. It's funded by the Swedish Research Council for Sustainable Development, FORMAS, and the Swedish Research Council, VR. The project's principal investigator is Dr. Alin Kadvak, and I've been your host, Ian M. Cook. Ta-da! If you would like to get in touch, and we really hope you do, then please go to justseafood.org. That is JUSTSEAFOOD.org, and you can find all of our details there. And not only that, you can also find much more information and research relating to the topic, and you can also find full transcripts of the podcast episodes. Finally, everybody says it in podcast, and everybody says it because it's true, that please do leave ratings and reviews if you are so inclined, because it really does help more people find out about the show.